Let's do it. I don't know what it is, but I feel it.
This is The Real Disruption.
So we have a bunch of people in here right now, so I'm going to introduce you. So Jatali Bellanton is somebody I met recently and she's friends with somebody who works with me, who's Rebecca Tardu, and she kind of made the introduction. But Jatali's a special person from what I know about you, that you have a long career in finance, and we get to that, and you started a foundation called Kids Who Bank, which I hope I'm saying all this correctly, that it's really teaching the youth how to invest in their future and how them to start investing at a very, very young age, which is something that I'm very interested in. But can you just give somebody kind of a background of, and I know you were in finance for a long time before you started doing that, so maybe just a background of how it started and how you got here.
Okay, so in short, my name is Jatali Bellanton. I'm the founder of Kids Who Bank and Brilliant Minds Unite. Both platforms one teaches youth financial literacy, the other one now teaches adult financial literacy. I started investment banking, and then I went to forensic accounting. The reason why I went into the finance world was because I had two parents who were very, very different, stark contrast. My mother figure was very irresponsible with money, and my dad was more like, no, this is a budget, this is how we invest in real estate, etc. And my mother figure, her and him ended up separating because she was so bad with money. And watching that journey, him seeing her basically waste money that he was earning hard, he was just kind of like, we don't mesh. And they broke up, and I think that was my first introduction to investing money. And then every time I would visit her, I stayed in England with my dad, and every time I would visit her, and she moved to Brooklyn, New York, she lived in a different part of Brooklyn. So people who hear the story know, like, she lived in Park Slope one minute, then she lived in like East New York, then she lived in like Bay Ridge in a very posh neighborhood, then she would like live in like Brownsville. It was like no rhyme or reason with her. And that was like literally my memories of her growing up was just her struggling with her finances and seeing her gamble and, you know, play the lotto thinking that she was going to take her check and double it and then lose her check, going to Atlantic City. And so every time I would visit her, I would go back home with those thoughts. And I think it triggered me, like, you know, it could scar you. And it scarred me to the point that it scarred me straight.
So you took it as something I shouldn't be doing instead of like, this is what normalcy is.
Yeah, and so like my mother figure, she was very big on like manicures and pedicures. Her hair always looked amazing. Her makeup was always perfect. And I remembered, you know, like, I think at one point I was just like, I'd rather be broke and have I'd rather be rich versus being broke and have nice nails, right? And it's just the prioritization that some women have and some people have where their beauty and their cosmetics and the superficial things, rather it's having a nice car or something of that nature, is more important than actually having a steady roof over your head or steady income. And so for me, I took it like, I was just like, I went left. So by the time I was 16 and a half, I was interning as a paid intern at Credit Suisse First Boston, which is a very major investment banking firm. And I just kind of took it and ran with it. You know, other people just kind of take it and they kind of like, oh, you know, I took it around and it became my life for many years. So investment banking, stocks, bonds.
Perfect. Yeah, I was gonna say, what was your focus? Was it investment? You were on the investment banking side.
It was stocks, bonds, ETFs for traded funds, helping basically people pick startup companies and building their portfolios. Okay. So we were able to, you know, one of my biggest claims was being able to help someone who gave us 10 million and turn it into 104 million by picking the right venture capital startup for them. And it's funny because years later, even after I left that and I went into forensic accounting and I had major clients like Marc Jacobs, Oscar de la Renta, and all these, like Gucci, we had all these major clients who wanted to make sure that their company wasn't going to get audited and be in trouble or had employees who were stealing from them. All these skills would just kind of all add up. And, you know, just life lessons. And now I'm in a position where I can give back, where we could teach kids, like, how do our youth invest in real estate? How do we as adults, even if you have little to no money, invest in real estate? Besides real estate credit scores, and how you can use business credit to propel your real estate career, or just different aspects, period. You know, and everything for me comes back to the 3 pillars, which is, you know, invest, save, and budget. So that's who I am. That's in short what got me started.
That's a good story. I mean, you really have the background to say, like, you had you wanted to learn how to invest at a young age, and you didn't have necessarily the same access as you're giving out to people now. How young are you starting? Like, where's your curriculum starting as far as the youth goes?
So in the school systems, our curriculum starts at age 6. We have like little picture books, and we have like little worksheets and things that the kids can start. And that's more budgeting, investing, and teaching them like currency. How does a dollar work? We teach them about inflation. We teach them about consumerism. Because when you really think about it, personally at home, I say that once a kid is 2 years old, we can start teaching them about consumerism, because 2-year-olds nowadays have a lot of requests. So when your child starts telling you that they want that kind of apple juice, and they don't like almond milk, but they like this, and they have all these requests, then those are expenses and things that you're spending money on to make your child life comfortable. So why not also have the conversation of budgeting and like, hey, did you earn your almond milk? Or that apple juice is expensive brand. Maybe you need to clean up your toys so you can earn your apple juice. And it just starts in little places, or cleaning up their toys so that they can get a Hot Wheels toy. Like my son, he's 5 now, but for as long as I can remember, he's always had this obsession with Hot Wheels cars. Every time we go to the supermarket, he would add this budget.
I have a 6-year-old, so I understand it. Yeah, they're at the counter when you so I know what you're dealing with.
Right. So I was like, okay, little man, you're gonna have to start earning these cars. And I think the hardest part as a parent was when the first time he didn't earn enough to buy his Hot Wheel car, we had to do his dad and I had to tag team and be like, well, you didn't earn the money this week, so unfortunately you can't buy your car. And he gave us the pouty face, and he was so cute, and he was like, but mommy, and I was just like, should I break? And I was like,
it's easy to break there.
So we didn't break, but the cool thing is now there's this lasting habit of him knowing that if he doesn't clean up his toys at night, he doesn't earn enough to potentially purchase a toy or something that he wants later down. Or even understanding that sometimes he might have to save up the money to earn enough money to buy a more expensive toy. And someone might be like, oh, toys this, toys that, but it's a good start for our children, because what better way to start, or even teaching him about stocks already. Like once he hit 5, we were like, okay, well, this company has stocks. You can actually earn a piece of this company, and explaining those things to him.
Are you finding
so he picks his own stocks?
That's great. Are you finding that starting, children younger at this point, that they're more an aptitude for it by the time they get to high school, and they start wanting to invest? And my question to you next is, I have a complicated relationship with higher education at this point now, especially college and post-college, because it's just so expensive. And kind of say to people now, when younger guys come to me, I'm always just like, well, what's your plan to monetize your degree? And that's a hard thing to ask a 17 or an 18-year-old. Like, how are you monetizing your degree? Because you really have to have a monetization. And they don't have a plan. But if you're going to spend $150,000 on something, you better have a plan on how you're going to monetize that. So, again, that's why it's complicated. It's a complicated conversation to have with somebody. But what are you teaching people, about that?
So for me, one of the first things that we did the first year, so I was kind of crazy. So when I left corporate, I wrote this book. In that journey of writing the book, someone suggested I create a curriculum out of it. And in the first few test trial of the program going into schools, I noticed that a lot of kids did not believe that people of their persuasion or their demographics, depending where they lived, could actually make money without being like, having a silver spoon. Sure. And when I started to see that, the first thing I did was create an organization called Kidpreneur Awards. And at Kidpreneur Awards, we basically honored youth entrepreneurs and philanthropists. So I think the first part of what I do in our curriculum is affirmations, positive affirmations, and showing them representation of people who didn't have silver spoons, who worked hard to earn every dollar to get to where they want to go. And these are kids who are as young as 6, 7 years old who made $100,000 selling tutus. And I start with basically showing them that and saying, well, part of that was having a plan and having a goal and having plans to back up those goals, even if it's one step or one action to lead towards that success. I feel like that's a very important part of connecting the dot of, this is the degree you want to have. What are you going to do with that degree? Is showing them representations of other people who don't have who haven't graduated from college, but might be doing something in the medical field, to start building the relationships in that medical world, right? And understanding that everything that we do are relationships, relationship building, and creating that foundation. So you can't say you want to be a doctor, but then you don't volunteer at like hospitals, or you don't do maybe charitable events, etc., to build to that. So with that said, that's the first step to me. Is making sure when we go into the schools, we're reinforcing it with images that and representation. And then the second step is actually giving them the tools. Giving them websites like grants.gov that maybe can help them fund their idea. Also giving them different options of, wait, did you actually apply for every funding and grant that you qualified for? There's so many options where that 150 can come down to 75K with just filling out the right paperwork. And if you hate paperwork, then maybe paying someone to fill out the paperwork for you. Because I know some people like, I'm like barter system. Maybe you don't have the financial, right? But maybe you're good at coding. So you barter with somebody who knows how to do grant writing or something of that nature, and you're able to exchange and then help lower in the long run what you have to pay. There's always something out there to lower your expenses.
So along those lines, there's a lot of adults on this call, obviously, that are, and I know you're teaching adults at this point now too. And a lot of people in my audience are real estate professionals or something around that. And I know you buy and sell homes and you hold. And what are you teaching adults at this point as far as what they should be looking at to invest their money, even if they don't have a lot of money to invest, to get themselves started?
So one of the biggest misconceptions in real estate is that you need a certain infinite amount of money to really invest. You don't need $5,000. You don't need $1,000. And I know when I say that, some real estate investors are like, oh yeah, you're whatever. But realistically, just to put it out there, it could be as simple as getting referrals to get started. I remember when I first started, I had some that I was holding that I did not want to get rid of, but I wanted more money to invest with. But I was also in a position where I left working a 9-to-5 and I didn't want to spend my savings and have zero, right? So because I didn't want to go down to zero, through building relationships and lasting relationships, I learned from a real estate investor that you can get referrals by making calls from home. You're home, you're stuck with the baby. Every time the baby goes down for a nap, let's say he sleeps for an hour, that could be an hour that you're on the phone making calls to potential people who want to sell their homes, and teaching me how to create a scrub list. It even got to a point where I was able to create scrub lists for other investors and real estate agents and sell it to them, right? So there's just so many ways in real estate you can make money. So one of them is creating your scrub list. And the scrub list can be so simple as literally everything from referrals. And if you're a loner and you don't have friends to give you referrals, then create your own scrub list. The hardest thing I think about being in a real estate world is rejection. Because let's be honest, you knock on 1,000 doors and at least 700 of them are going to tell you, no, I don't want to sell my property to you, right?
Yeah.
And if you call 700 people, at least 600 of them are going to hang up the phone on you, right? But I learned in a real estate game that the first tip was keeping them on the phone longer. Because if they remember who you are and you're personable, even if they don't sell their actual house to you, they might be referring you to someone else like, oh, I spoke to this nice young lady on the phone, right? And a no doesn't hurt you. A no is a no. So what? They told you no. They don't even know who you are. And if they do end up one day knowing who you are, what does it matter? You've already made your commissions off of people. So for people who have no money, who are investing in real estate, or people like, let's say, who are agents that are relying upon the broker to give them all of their leads, the first thing I tell you is create your own leads. And I tell this to college students. I tell this to adults who are investing. The money is really in making your own leads, because your broker will appreciate you more when you have the leads and you bring them to the table.
Well, you have the leverage then. If you bring the business, you always have the leverage. We're only in a position of weakness when we're not bringing any value to the table. If you bring value, you have the leverage. So I agree with you completely there. Where are you looking to? I mean, this is the market's been weird for the last, I would say, even 4 years, where the margins aren't the same, and it's been a little bit, in my opinion, hard to get the right margins that I want to see to invest in stuff. As far as real estate goes, but it's loosening up a little bit, and you got to work. You just have to work harder to find stuff. Obviously, this stuff you have to work harder. Where are you, strategy-wise? What are you looking at these days in real estate, and where do you think there is some value?
So one of the first places I look at are landlord-friendly states, because anything that I purchase, I always contemplate: do I want to keep tenants? So the first thing before I even have a conversation with tenants, right now with the market the way it is, I tell people that if you don't have at least a year's worth of savings to maintain the property, you should not be thinking of an additional property. And that should be a year of your own property and a year for the additional property that you're going to bring on. To give you an example, I have a lot of friends, including myself, who have had Airbnb properties or properties that we rent out. And I know that right now with the lockdowns, the people who had rotating Airbnb clients are now in a position where they can't have clients. They have no money coming in from those properties, but they still have to pay some of the mortgage and the balances on them. So one of my favorite things to do is make sure that anything I invest in is something that I'm either flat out paying for, or I know that I have at least a year to 2 years cushion on it.
Airbnb is a good point, by the way. And I brought this up at the very beginning of this pandemic. I said, that's a place that to look for value, because that was the strategy. And you made more money by having these, seasonal renters or whatever. But, and I saw this week that Airbnb is firing 50% of their staff now. So they're seeing the crunch. And, I think that as an investment opportunity, looking at people who own Airbnb properties may be something you can look at. And that's where
Exactly. So I do that. So
yeah.
I've even had a few people that I was associates with reach out to me and say, hey, I have to sell this property. Do you want to take it?
Sure.
So one of the first places to look, people who you've seen Airbnb listings for, you can reach out to them. You can narrow down their neighborhoods where they live. You can reach out to them and say, hey, are you still keeping your Airbnb? Are you interested in selling it? Especially if you know you can maintain it. And the reason why I say that is, don't think that you're going to purchase something and just flip it automatically, because realistically speaking, in this market, nothing is definite. So you can't buy a property and think, oh, in 1 month I'll have a new investor. Or even if you have an investor telling you, hey, I have $1 million, let's go. Until the $1 million is your bank account, it's not $1 million.
You're right.
It's not for you. It's not your money. So you should always make sure that you can take care of the state taxes, the property taxes, any last minute issues, like if a water pipe breaks and it's an additional $10,000 to fix the property. Those are things that you should do before you start investing. But on a bright side, ways that I invest are landlord-friendly states, I was saying before, and then I use tools like, I'll go on acris.gov. So I mention that often, acris.gov. So like if it's like New York State, for instance, most states and governments have a site that is specifically lists the deeds of the property, if the person's had modifications, and this is public information, it's public knowledge. It's just about learning how to use the website to your advantage. So you could pick like an area code that you're interested in, like let's say in 10012, right? Like let's say that's Manhattan. Mm-hmm. You'll put in that zip code and it'll give you everything on that neighborhood, everyone who owns in that neighborhood. And then you can open up each deed and see, like, has that person had a modification? Is that person, people with modifications tend to be people who might have issues, right? So if they're on their second modification, then that might be like, maybe this is someone to add to your scrub list, because that's someone you can call and then tell them, hey, I don't know financially how you're doing, but I'm in a position that I can help you. And, people who have lived in a property for 80 years or 60 years, that means chances are their property is paid off. If their property's paid off, that's a good prospect for you. They might be tired of the cold and this whole pandemic situation and being locked in a house. So especially for like a market like New York, where people don't most of the time have a big backyard, a lot of older people are like, I'm over this. I'm retiring to Florida, because they're seeing all their friends in Florida going in their backyards, taking walks around the block. So this is a perfect time now to change your strategy and say, hey, are you ready to retire? Are you ready to move to Florida? I'd be more than happy. Your house is worth, whatever. I'd be more than happy to take over the rest of your mortgage or whatever. But you do your comparables, know your numbers.
So you mostly, strategy-wise, and I love the stuff you're saying, and some of the stuff you just said, especially looking up the zip codes is a great tip for sure. Are you looking up stuff, trying to find stuff off market most of the time? Like you're trying to mine for your own property, which is the right way to do it.
I do both. So I'll tell you this, and it's probably not good for me to say, but so like I'll go on Bank of America. Bank of America lists their foreclosure properties, their auctions, right? So they don't give you the address, but they give you a picture of the property and the specs. So one of the tricks that I'll do, there's an app, I won't tell you which app, that's when you have to do your homework, that will allow you to find by triangulation and a picture, allow you to generally get the address by a picture. So one of the things I would do, and it's an app you have to pay for, but one of the things I would do is I'll go on like the foreclosure sites on like Bank of America. I'll take the picture, then I'll find out who's in foreclosure, who's about to lose their house, and I'll reach out to them and say, hey, they're taking your house for $30,000. I'm willing to give you $50,000. Now that's a $20,000 cushion. If they take your house through this foreclosure, you get zero. But if I give you 50,000, you're getting 20,000, and they're getting the 30,000 that they need, and I'll reassume your mortgage from you. So like I'll do those. I'll do that often. But I also will do pre-foreclosures, and I also do before they hit the market. I prefer before they hit the market, before a lot of agents are all over them and brokers are all over them. But you know, realistically, sometimes you don't catch it before then. But when they're in foreclosure and they're at that point where they don't really know what to do, and they're skeptical of using an agent, I tend to step in.
Well, I mean, just for everybody that's on here, these are awesome tips. Like, these are the stuff you usually get. You know, a lot of what I've dealt with a lot even on the mortgage side for the last 2 years is a lot of the flipping strategy was buy, rehab, sell, or rent, and on and on and on. And the problem with that is what I saw was that, just like you said, unless you were buying properties like you're buying them, the margins are really thin. So now's the time where that becomes a little scary. And what I'm seeing from the funds that I deal with is that they're buying a lot of these pools of loans that were fix and flips or investor properties for 80 cents on the dollar, 84 cents on the dollar, which could be a good thing at some point because they're buying the notes. So if they start foreclosing on those notes, which they will, it's going to create inventory in the market. But they were only able to do that because people were working on such thin margins. If people were working on greater margins, there'd be equity in the homes and it wouldn't really matter as much at the moment. So, I think the strategy you're talking about is really amazing. And I think it should be part of everybody's strategy, even if it's not your whole strategy.
I fully agree. And so even down to people who are like, okay, well, I'm still scared of the real estate housing market. I mean, one of the things I used to also love to do was go to auctions. So most states have their own auctions, and most countries will have auctions on properties. Okay. It could be properties that have like, let's say a squatter issue. It could be a property that has settlement issues, or sometimes there's none of that, and it's just like a tax lien or something of the nature. Sure. And you'll go to these auctions, and sometimes you're buying a property sight unseen. But when you do your market research, sometimes even if you don't get the address before you get in there, you'll know a zip code well enough to be like, if this is in this area, I want it because the average comparables in this area are X, Y, and Z. So most of the time, they'll at least let you know what areas you're gonna be investing in, right? So if you're going to, like, let's say an auction in New York, New Jersey, then you know that, hey, maybe I need to familiarize myself with all of the zip codes in that area. Some of these auctions, the houses go for like $5,000, right? And granted, you take on a responsibility, but one thing I see that is an error often in real estate is people are expecting to get like the full profit. So if the property is 5,000 but it's worth 60,000, then I've seen people make the mistake of putting in another $40,000 in a property and make like a $15,000 profit, where you just spent your time wasting your resources, your time, and all this energy into a property that only made you $15,000 profit. But you could have paid $5,000 and sold it for like $20,000 and still made $50,000. And then somebody else would have to worry about the rehab and spend time and resources on rehabbing it.
Yeah, you're right. So, you brought up a good point. The auctions, I think, are great. And I also think that you have to know what you're doing walking into them. Are there any tips you could give as far as auction goes? Because I've seen that too. I've been to a lot of auctions, and if you go enough to the same county, you see the same people every single time. There's people that are there every single time.
Yes.
And they know exactly what they're bidding on, and they know exactly what they're doing. So, what I always try to do is give people ways to avoid potholes. Like, how do I avoid the mistakes that I've made, and I've made plenty in that situation? So what would you be advice to somebody going to an auction and what to avoid in that kind of situation?
Don't get competitive to the point that you forget what your price point is and go above it just because you're locked in with someone, right? I know I've made that mistake where it's like you have your bidding and somebody else is bidding on something that you want. And I'm like, well, you know what? I start rationalizing last minute while I'm there. Like, maybe I can make an extra blah, blah, blah for this. Maybe I can go up another 5. If you come in with a number, stick to that number. And that same goes for like stocks, for investing in stocks, right? If you have a number that is going to be your cap that you like, okay, once I make this amount in profit, I'm ready to sell, stick to it. So the same thing goes for real estate. And another issue that I noticed is people thinking that they have a backer that they don't have. So they go in and put themselves on the hook. And then when they come back out, like their partner, whoever it is, doesn't give them the money that they're supposed to give. And now they're on the hook for something that they financially can't do. And that also ruins your opportunities for going back for another auction. The list continues. As well, also always be willing to understand that it might be a less of a profit margin than you're expecting. I remember I had a property when I got there was mold and mildew to the point that you open the door and the smell was so strong. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this. And I just doubled the money that I put into it, and I just left it at that. And I lost a big profit because it could have gone for way more, but I just had to know when to fold them. So
Yeah.
when you walk into these auctions, you never know. Even if the picture looks nice, you never know what you're gonna get when you get there. And the picture looks so good, I was like, oh, this is a great one. And I got there, and it was nothing like the picture. It looked like they used a picture from like the 1980s or something.
But you said something smart there. There was know your limitations too. Like, sometimes people are always just concerned about the money they didn't get because they didn't take it to full fruition. Oh, it could have made this much money. If there's a profit on the table and you can take it off, sometimes it's smart to just take it off. And I've made a lot of mistakes investing in real estate or stock or whatever. And what I learned more than anything is when I was able to, take the profit and be smart about taking a small profit instead of gambling, I was better off. I was really better
100%.
off. Yeah.
And that's the same thing for stocks. So people will be like, oh, you know what? This company's outperforming what I thought was going to perform. And then you make a mistake, right? So which makes me think about REITs, real estate investment trusts. So if you are afraid of entering the real estate market and you prefer to get, like, let's say, stocks in real estate, I think that's something that real estate investors sometimes don't do enough, or invest in REITs, or even making sure that they properly protect their real estate trusts, right? Even when I invest, I make sure that anything that I purchase is underneath a real estate. It's an LLC, the trust, everything is layered properly. And that's the difference between you as an investor, paying 7 to 11% in taxes versus 33% in taxes as an individual. And, so I'll meet people who are real estate investors and they'll be like on their 5th property, but they're all doing it under their personal name. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And they're not living in the properties. It's not like they're living in the property for 1 year, then going to the next one and trying to keep continuous. They're not doing that trick. It's literally that they don't know or understand that the way you structure your investing in real estate can be the difference of you paying only 7% in taxes. I've even seen people pay less in taxes, especially if you do deferred community and opportunity zones. You can get deferred grants. I mean, just in 2019 alone, Trump had a law, if you're paying attention in real estate world, where if you invested in an opportunity zone, he completely you had to pay 0% in taxes. So it's really important that you're paying attention to these laws, because you could have invested in a REIT in that neighborhood. You could have invested in an actual real estate or a laundromat or something in a neighborhood that was considered opportunity zone, and pay 0% taxes for the rest of your life.
It's
on
really
that
you brought up opportunity. And I love REITs, by the way. That was something we spoke about a few weeks ago on this webinar. I think it's a great investment opportunity in REITs right now, especially now looking at the right REITs, because if you look at 2008, 2009, 2010, people who invested in REITs made 20 times their money.
Oh, yeah.
So I think now, because they've been down with the market, it's a great time to invest. But touch on something with opportunity zones that's really interesting. So about a year ago, opportunity zones, the word opportunity zone was like the most, you heard it everywhere. Everybody wanted to invest in opportunity zones, and all you heard about was opportunity zones. Now I feel like it's died down a little bit. And I don't know if it's because not enough people had access to them, or people just don't realize what it is. But I feel like there's a big opportunity there that people are missing, and no pun intended, in opportunity zones, that there's big investment opportunities there. Are you finding them still?
So I'm still finding them. And the thing is, the same areas that people were talking about last year are the same areas that are still currently pumping. Rather it's Maryland or Detroit or you name it. It's still the same areas that are really holding claim and are really foundational when it comes to opportunity zones. And what people complain about gentrification, but this is an opportunity for you to be a part of the positive or regentrification of a neighborhood. And being, no matter if you're brown or whatever complexion you are, knowing that, hey, I have an opportunity to be a part of this. And, honestly, that's how opportunity zones really get flipped. It's because of the gentrification. It's these moments of people coming in and creating the juice bars and different kind of warehouses and different kind of businesses in the areas. And that's where the money's at. Because can you imagine if you created a juice bar in an opportunity zone? And one, you're going to get people, every area in the United States right now have people who are understanding the importance of health.
Right.
right? So like, let's say
That's a
you
good point.
create a juice bar, or you invest in a juice bar in a location in the land, and then they're paying you rent to have their juice bar there. That would have been 0% taxes paid on an investment property that's continuously making you money, that's going to make you money, and which will help to reface a community, which would then allow you to make more money, because as the community keeps picking up, then your money and your investment is even more secure.
And you made another good point, and you brought something to mind for me, especially in opportunity zones. Mom and pop retail is more prevalent than it is in major cities. Like you could own commercial spaces in their city. And I know retail is a little bit of a funny thing right now, and people don't know what to think about it, but people use the stores in gentrified neighborhoods. They use the local stores. It's more of so you're right there where there's an opportunity, I think, in those places to buy commercial and have a real long-term profit there in that kind of area.
And people pay all kinds of money for commercial spaces. So that could be $3,000 to $5,000 monthly that's coming into you from this investment.
Yeah.
And and that's just monthly minimum. I know on average that's what, and that's even in an area that some people might be like, oh, but it's a little sketchy still. But guess what? It's people like you as investors who come into the neighborhood who are willing to take that initial hit, that profit in the long run. So some games in real estate is a long-term game, and some is a short-term, right? That's a long-term game. That's a 2 years down the line investment. That's a 3 years down the line investment. Even with Detroit, when everyone's jumping on it, people at first were like, oh no, it's so many ghost towns. And now you notice a whole movement of people who are like moving back to Detroit. We're reopening a factory. We're doing this, we're doing that. But it's because literally it's like somebody had a vision and was able to be like, I'm going to hold on to this for 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we gave everybody a lot of information. So I'm going to just let everybody, if you guys, anybody has any questions, you can start dropping them. I have a couple of people that asked questions already, but if anybody has any questions, if you want to drop them, we'll get them answered for Jatali. Are you buying in opportunity zones yourself? Have you bought in Detroit? Have you bought in Baltimore? Have you bought in those places? Yeah. Yeah. So you have
100%. I've done like for Detroit, gone to the auctions, done like we did a block with the whole block. And so I'll give you the technique for that, right? So people think, oh, a block, you did every house on the block. The block had 8 houses. We did 2 of the houses on the block. And then for the rest of the houses, we just refurbished the outside of the houses. So we did the interior and exterior of 2 full houses. The other 6, we did only the exterior. We made sure that the windows, the doors, and the landscaping looked good, and that the landscaping for the whole block looked good. And then we moved in 2 families, which was the hardest part, was finding 2 families to move into like a ghost neighborhood, right? Yeah. But because the curb side and the curb appeal of the other properties looked fine, they were more interested in it. And then we sold the whole thing to a developer who wanted to continue the project.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then they were able to then take their time and do house by house, the interior. And I didn't have to spend the money on the interior of the house by house. So that was one of my techniques for that. So, not knowing that I didn't have to actually do the interior and exterior of all 8 properties. And it was more about curb appeal, because the first thing that people look at when they come to a neighborhood to invest in a neighborhood is, how does the landscaping look? Does it look let down? Do do all of the houses, do the shingles look completely disgusting? How long the house can go far?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. Do people care about their homes in this neighborhood enough because if you have good neighbors, then now what about in those neighborhoods? Are you seeing Section 8 housing, or are you recommending that? I mean, right now, I don't have a Section 8 strategy, but it would make sense to have a Section 8 strategy right now just because it's guaranteed rent during a time when there's not.
Yeah, right. I personally don't necessarily focus on that aspect of it. For me personally, I have friends who do, and I know that they're caking right now because the government is guaranteeing at least 70% of their money no matter what, pandemic or not. But me personally, that's just not my focus. I prefer to purchase places that I would maybe want to live in. So rather it's in Miami, Florida, or in South Africa, Cape Town, everything that I hold on to are places that would be places that I want to actually maybe retire and kick out my tenant and retire to. So if it's not one of those places, I don't really mess with as much. Although now I'm going into the commercial space. But the commercial space for me is a little bit different because I'm doing it in Ghana. So so for me it's a little bit different because I wanted to just go international more. And so I wanted to do something commercial in Ghana because I feel like commercial in the United States is a little bit saturated. So because of that, although I do invest, I don't aggressively invest in commercial spaces in the United States because once again, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of, people don't realize the coding and all the everything that you need to get just to get the permits, all the permits that you need, and how expensive all the permits add up to, and just how many liabilities you have on the line for that. So for me, I was like, and I looked at Ghana and I liked the market there. And I know it's a booming with expats. And I was like, I'd rather get the American dollars in Ghana from the expats
That's really
and the
interesting.
local Ghanaians.
Yeah. I'm not that advanced. That's really interesting. I will say if you're gonna buy commercial space or foreclosures, whatever, and if you haven't done it before, find somebody you can trust that has, because you're gonna have a lot of issues up front usually. I mean,
100%.
It's not an easy
100%.
process. I have another question that came in.
Oh, wait.
Me.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, sure.
Before I forget?
Yeah.
REITs, for those who do not know, is a real estate investment trust. My friend just texted me. She's like, what is an REIT? I'm like, how are you, my friend? But REITs, just so you know, are real estate investment trusts. And REITs, basically, you can invest, like, let's say Tanger Outlets. A lot of people like to go to Woodbury Commons Outlets. There's an actually REIT, which is a stock that is publicly traded, that people can purchase and invest in all the outlets, right? Hospitals, most hospitals are owned by REIT. So you can invest in REIT, which builds hospitals. So the Long Island Jewishes of the world are owned by this company. So, right now with this pandemic, they're saying that they need to build more hospitals because we didn't have enough hospitals to deal with the influx of people. So something like that would be, what company creates these hospitals, and then you can invest in that REIT.
Yeah, and again, I love REITs. There's a bunch out there right now that I'm looking at, and a lot of them are reporting that they're collecting most of their rents, which is interesting. I've seen a lot of them come out now that say, hey, 90% of rent, 85% of rent we've been collecting, which is great news. But some of them I would avoid right now. Some of them that own some retail,
like the outlets. I think I would personally avoid the outlets.
Yeah.
Personally,
I like hospitals.
My personal opinion.
That's a great hospitals. You're right. Commercial. That's amazing.
They're not going anywhere. They're only expanding.
Yeah, they're only expanding. You're 100% right. Somebody asked, is there other things that you're recommending people invest in outside of real estate that you like right now?
I mean, like I'll mention stocks. Like there are certain stocks that I would definitely suggest, especially like, let's say stocks that before the pandemic hit, let's say October, November and December in the stock world doesn't really count because that's the most busiest between Thanksgiving and Christmas. All companies get a bump, right? Yeah. So if you look at the company's performance in the month of September and October, 2019, if that company was doing very well in those months, and then let's say right now they're not doing as well, let's say they came from $50 to $14, my professional opinion would be that might be a company that you might want to put on your list to invest in, because after the pandemic, long-term investing, after the pandemic crosses us, let's say 6 months to a year from now, that company will probably go back up to the $40, $50 it was at before. But it would be your job then to make sure you watch the news, make sure they don't file bankruptcy, because one thing people forget investing in stocks is if a company files bankruptcy and you, let's say, have $10,000 invested in it, you lose the full amount. Yeah. Versus if the company was at, let's say, $50 per share and went down to $1 per share, if they didn't file bankruptcy, then that company, then you still own the shares. So if it goes back up to 40, you still own the shares and all as well. But that's one thing to keep in mind. So yeah, I would really, the stock market to me, a lot of people are afraid of it, but I honestly don't think that is something to be afraid of. It's just about making sure you do your homework closer and you watch the news, because the stock market is like an emotional person who, like, it was an emotional influencer, right? So how some people, the more likes they get happy, and then they do more tricks and they want to post more and they're more engaging. Yeah. And then when they don't get likes and they don't get the energy that they want, they're sad and they don't post as much and they're not doing as well. Convert that to the stock market. That's the same way. Yeah. Look at Beyonce, right? Beyonce's Bayhive is so influential. So if you as an investor are watching, let's say you notice that Beyonce on her Instagram posted collab with Adidas. Someone like you have an advantage, right? Because now you know that she's about to do something with Adidas. And I was talking to my friend, one of my friends recently on a live, and we had that conversation about the whole Adidas thing. You would have had advantage before Wall Street people do, because you would have known that a collab is coming. It's going to sell out. If you know it's going to sell out, then you run and go buy the stocks before everybody knows. Then it comes out. And when the first quarter happens of her live, most Wall Street people are waiting for major breaking news or for the first quarter of sales so that the quarter of sales to let them know this is how well it performed before the stocks usually go up. So you would have had an inside scoop. So sometimes just knowing the right influencers like Rihanna's Navy and all these people, or Lady Gaga, or people who who have a crew of people who are harassing the internet and trolling, can help.
That actually is good because people follow all the trends now, especially because everything's on social. So that's really that's a good tip.
Yeah, and then other investments, I would say physical commodities, natural resources, gas, oil, things that make countries rotate. A lot of companies are oil backed. When you think about that, think about that. The other backing is gold backing, which means gold and silver might be something. Rather, it's physical pieces of bullions and ounces, or the stocks once again that you can invest in. Those are other things I tell people to invest in. And then infrastructure. So like personally, myself, having gone to Ghana, I spent a month in December with my family. And I remember noticing that there were a lot of pavement issues. There were issues with the routes. The highway was extremely long. They needed more outlets. There was just certain things like the phone infrastructure, water cisterns that I'm like, oh, now I can go to another country, or even here in my own backyard in the United States, invest in those infrastructure aspects too, because certain things are not going anywhere.
So, so is Ghana someplace you've invested before, or something new for you?
So it's new as of 2019, but I've invested in the African market before. So I do my research, and I'm building a youth art museum there in Ghana. So because I was building that there, I wanted to also make sure if I'm going to be visiting it frequent, that I had other investments that I was also going to be checking up on. That it's kind of like a triple killing three birds with one stone. Okay. So that's how it came down for me. But there's other parts in the African market that are safe, that that are welcoming back repatriation of Africa in a whole. And there's a lot of money that is there in the markets. And for me, the reason why I'm mentioning Ghana in particular is just because I think that as an investor, it's important that we invest and diversify our portfolio, not just diversifying our portfolio in the United States, but worldwide. So if the American market crashes and that you have money in Africa, you have money in Europe, I have stuff in London and the UK, and Manchester, I think it's really important. I have stuff in Canada. Like, I think it's really important that if one market crashes, that you at least have a couple of backups.
That makes sense. So I'm gonna set you free in a couple of minutes. Where is the best place to get in touch with you if people want to contact you, if they have questions or advice or whatever?
So my Instagram is honestly the best thing that I really keep up with lately. Is Kids Who Bank.
I'm gonna put that in the chat right now, everybody.
Yep, and thank you. And my name is Jatali Bellanton. So if you put in my name, Jatali, I'm probably the only Jatali on Instagram, and you'll probably find me easily. And then as well, email me, info@kidswhobank.com, or if it's more like investing stuff, info@brilliantmindsunite.com. And those are the two main places. Was there any other questions that people had before we go?
Did anybody have anything else that they wanted to ask? I know we gave a lot, and we'll probably talk all day. Getting a lot of thank yous on Facebook and on here. But
awesome.
Again, if anybody has any questions, they want to reach out to Jatali, that's her information, or reach out to me, and I'll get you in touch. And I'm popping in on next webinar for next week into the chat, so you guys have that.
Awesome.
But Jatali, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I'm looking forward to we're back out to normal, and you can get back to doing what you're doing, and I'd love to help.
And we have the Kidpreneur Awards, and we honor you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to that. I can't wait. I'm excited about it.
Likewise. All right, well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to doing some deals with you and seeing you soon.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Everybody, take care. Stay safe.